All right, this is Geometry B, Unit 2, Lesson 5, and the title is Conditions for Rhombuses, Rectangles, and Squares. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to prove something is a rhombus, a rectangle, or a square. So what information do we need to have to be able to prove this? All of this starts with assuming it is a parallelogram. So here are our rules we're going to use here. If a parallelogram has congruent diagonals, okay, then the parallelogram is a rectangle. Okay, so if a parallelogram, not a rectangle, has congruent diagonals, then it's a rectangle. It has congruent right angles. Okay, if a parallelogram has perpendicular diagonals, then the shape is a rhombus. Okay, so let's sketch these two cases. So we have a parallelogram where the diagonals are congruent. So if I say A, B, C, D, I'm saying AC is congruent to BD. If AC is congruent to BD, if the diagonals are congruent in a parallelogram, now it has to be a parallelogram, then it's a rectangle. Likewise, we've just said here, if a parallelogram has diagonals that are perpendicular to each other, then it's a rhombus. This is a rectangle, this is a rhombus. Okay? Another rule, if a parallelogram has diagonals that bisect opposite angles, okay, let me sketch that. Then it is a rhombus. Okay, so in other words, if we have this situation, you have some parallelogram, okay, and the diagonals bisect the opposite angles. So it splits that, and it splits that. So these two are split in half. It bisects the opposite angles, then it is a rhombus. Okay, and basically a square is both a rhombus and a rectangle. Okay, so if we have a rectangle that is a rhombus, okay, then we have a square. Okay, so for example, if I have a parallelogram and the diagonals are congruent, that makes it a rectangle, but the diagonals are also perpendicular. That makes it a rhombus. So it's both a rhombus and a rectangle, therefore it is a square. It is a square. Right? So you're going to be using these ideas to prove something is a rhombus or a square or a rectangle. Okay? So for example, let's do one quick example here. Let me make some space. Okay? And I'm going to draw a scenario, and I'm not going to draw it accurately. I'm not going to draw it to scale. I'm purposely going to mislead you, but I'm going to give you some facts about it. So we have a parallelogram. We're told it's a parallelogram. We know it's a parallelogram. Okay? We know it's a parallelogram. Okay? And we tell you this. We tell you that I'm going to draw the diagonals here. I'm going to draw the diagonals. and we tell you that, it's taking me a while to draw it. We tell you that, okay, A, B, C, D, okay. If I tell you that AC is congruent to BD, right, then we can conclude what? Think about it for a second. What shape is this? If the diagonals are congruent, the shape must be a rectangle. If, on the other hand, I tell you not AC is congruent to BD, what if I tell you that AC is perpendicular to BD? They form a right angle. Think about it for a second. What is the shape? If a parallelogram has perpendicular diagonals, then it is a rhombus. Okay? And if I tell you that the measure of angle, or if I just tell you that angle ABD is congruent to angle CBD, and ADB, angle ADB, is congruent to angle CDB, then we've got a diagonal that bisects opposite angles, and it actually only takes one pair of opposite angles for this one to be true. Then the shape is a rhombus. Okay. Hopefully that helps. That's just an introduction. Take your time as you go through the lesson. If you need help, feel free to book a live lesson with me.